Today's source material is a transcript of a highly opinionated political commentary analyzing shifting alliances among media figures regarding Israel and domestic controversies, culminating in a sponsor read. And honestly, I want to jump straight into the feedback because there's so much to unpack here, especially regarding how the tone is working or maybe not working for them.
Yeah, let's dive right in. So the use of highly abrasive and polarizing rhetoric risks overshadowing the material's underlying substantive political arguments. I mean, when you look at this transcript, there is this really heavy, almost crutch-like reliance on quoting these derogatory slurs and insults from commentators.
Right, it's like they're just reading the worst parts of the internet out loud.
Exactly. The host spends, a significant amount of audio real estate laughing at phrases like Muslim peen breath and referencing clout-chasing retardation. And it just creates this massive auditory distraction.
Oh, totally.
It actively dilutes the credibility and the impact of the much stronger, data-driven points that they actually make later in the piece.
Yeah, so the argument here is that the commentary actually possesses a really solid geopolitical foundation, right? But the creator is essentially burying their own lead under a layer of internet mud.
They are burying it completely, yeah. Because, the material makes a surprisingly robust case for its geopolitical stance. We see these highly valid arguments brought up by figures like Dana Lash and a commenter named Boney regarding the quantifiable disparity in propaganda funding.
Right, between Israel, Qatar, and China.
Exactly. And those are dense, numerical, geopolitical realities. But the moment you force your audience to process, middle school level insults right alongside international funding discrepancies, those valid substantive points get entirely lost in the noise.
Well, let's dig into the why of that, because I think, a lot of creators assume that mixing highbrow data with lowbrow insults makes the content more accessible. It's that whole, I'm just a regular person telling you the news aesthetic.
Yeah, it is a really common strategy, but it fundamentally misunderstands the psychological mechanism of how an audience processes audio information.
Interesting. How so?
Well, when a listener hears a barrage of highly charged, inflammatory language, their brain is triggered into a state of heightened emotional arousal. And in that state, the cognitive centers responsible for processing complex, analytical data like, the staggering financial investments in global influence campaigns by Qatar and China, they're essentially turned down.
Wow, so they literally can't process the math because they're stuck on the insult.
Exactly. You are forcing your audience to process pure shock value, which leaves literally zero bandwidth for them to process logic.
And let me just play devil's advocate for a second. Is there a risk that by softening this language, the creators might lose the specific shock value or the authenticity that their core audience tunes in for? I mean, if you're building a brand on being the unapologetic, anti-establishment voice, telling them to stop quoting inflammatory comments sounds a lot like telling them to conform, right? So how do they balance that inherent need for edge with the need for credibility?
That's a great question, but authenticity doesn't strictly have to equal abrasiveness. You can be fierce, you can be uncompromising, and you can be highly opinionated without relying on basement-level slurs. Let's look at it from the perspective of authority.
Okay, yeah.
When you rely on a term like peen breath, you signal to outside listeners and honestly, even to the more intellectually leaning members of your own base, that the argument lacks substance, even when it actually has it.
Ah, right. It's like a self-inflicted wound.
Totally. You willingly surrender your authority in exchange for a really cheap laugh. If you want to maintain the edge, use that sharp edge to dissect the hypocrisy of the geopolitical funding. Be ruthless about the fact, not the vocabulary.
I love that. Be ruthless about the facts. So what does that actually sound like in practice, How do they rewrite that specific section without sounding like some sterile, boring news anchor?
Right. So if they want to fix this, they need to recalibrate the rhetorical edge by prioritizing the substantive comparisons over the extreme comments, while still keeping their fierce tone.
Okay, give me an example.
So instead of reading a comment like "Green Beret nap time" verbatim and, repeating the slurs, they could simply summarize the commenter's outrage regarding the perceived misinformation.
Like paraphrasing the anger instead of quoting the slur.
Exact. They can say something like, look at the sheer delusion in these comments. People are losing their minds over absolute fictions. Then you just pivot immediately to the hard data.
Hit them with the numbers.
Right. Hit them with Boney's argument that Israel is, quote, far outdone by pro-Islam anti-West's OP, or just drop the hammer with Dana Lash's point about Qatar and China's influence campaigns.
Oh, I see. You hit them with the reality of the money rather than the reality of the trolls.
Exactly. You maintain the aggression, but you aim it at the geopolitical target rather than the comment section. It just upgrades the entire listening experience.
Yeah, and, when you surrender your authority with internet slang, it doesn't just hurt your foreign policy argument. It actually completely derails your credibility when you try to tackle complex domestic legal battle, which is exactly what happens when this creator jumps into the next section.
Oh, definitely.
Because the narrative transition from international geopolitical discourse to a specific domestic legal trial lacks a conceptual bridge, leaving the audience entirely disoriented.
Disoriented is the perfect word for it. The transcript jumps abruptly from discussing Megyn Kelly's views on Israel directly into her stance on the Tyler Robinson case and something they referred to as the Charlie assassination.
Right, which is just wild if you don't know what that is.
Exactly. It assumes the audience possesses this extreme insider knowledge. We get references to Jack Posabic's involvement, a zoomed-in version of 12.4, and Candace Owens' timeline of grace.
Yeah, the 12.4 thing, I was like, wait, what are we talking about?
Right, because they abandoned the initial geopolitical theme without warning, without explanation, and literally without any structural connective tissue.
It's like yanking the steering wheel at 80 miles an hour. I mean, you are walking out of a seminar on international relations directly into the middle of a murder mystery movie. Without a lobby to connect them, the listener's brain just needs a minute to catch up.
And in an audio medium, if the listener needs a minute to catch up, they just turn the audio off. Let's talk about cognitive load and the concept of the mental filing cabinet, right?
Oh yeah, I love this concept. Let's get into it.
So when someone is listening to you speak, they are basically opening a mental folder for the topic at hand. Right now, in the first part of the critique, the folder is labeled Israel-Qatar media funding.
Makes sense.
But then, when you suddenly start throwing out hyper-specific terminology like zoomed-in version of 12.4, the listener is frantically trying to fit that into the Middle East funding folder.
And it obviously doesn't fit.
No, it doesn't. And when it doesn't fit, you induce cognitive whiplash.
But, could this abruptness be an intentional stylistic choice, though? Because there is a huge market for that chaotic stream of consciousness format. Like, people love feeling like they're just eavesdropping on two friends venting at a bar. And friends at a bar don't exactly use formal transition sentences.
Sure, but there's a massive difference between a conversational tone and structural chaos.
Okay, fair point.
You can sound like you are just chatting over coffee while still employing invisible conversational guideposts. In fact, if you look at the best conversational audio programs in the world, they are heavily, heavily structured. They just hide the scaffolding really well.
Right, it feels effortless, but it took a lot of effort to get there.
Exactly. When you jump from an international conflict to a highly localized trial without a single transition word, the scaffolding isn't hidden. It's just missing entirely.
And that missing scaffolding actively excludes newer listeners. I mean, if someone tunes in because they are really interested in the commentary on Megyn Kelly and Israel, but then they're immediately hit with unexplained references to 12.4, they're going to assume they missed an inside joke.
Oh, completely. It builds a brick wall around your content that just prevents any kind of audience growth.
So how do they fix that?
To fix that, you construct a thematic transition that connects the two distinct segments, anchoring them to a shared central premise.
Okay.
The connection clearly exists in the creator's mind, right? They're talking about the shifting alliances of media figures and the search for objective truth across different political realms. But they never vocalize that connection for the listener.
Yeah, you can't just expect the audience to reach your mind. Let's lay out how to actually build that bridge in the script. To introduce the Tyler Robinson segment, the creator needs to explicitly establish that thematic link before dropping the new names, right?
Yes, precisely.
So they could add a linking phrase like, Megyn Kelly's shifting perspectives aren't just limited to foreign policy. We actually see this exact same tension in how she's handling domestic controversies, like the Tyler Robinson case, where she and Candace Owens are looking at the exact same piece of evidence and drawing completely different conclusions.
That is perfect. Notice what that one sentence does. It gives the listener permission to close the mental folder on foreign policy and open a new folder for domestic trials, while understanding exactly why those two folders belong in the same filing cabinet.
Right, you're giving them the reason for the pivot.
Exactly. You are taking on the cognitive load so the audience doesn't have to.
Its political and personal discourse to a product advertisement creates severe tonal whiplash that disrupts the gravity of the preceding content.
It really does. I mean, we see them transitioning immediately from serious, emotionally charged topics, like a Charlie assassination and the literal fear of being deplatformed or silenced, straight into, quote, by the way, if you are not onto the fact that even your own tap water actually still has tons of bad stuff in it.
Which is just so jarring.
It is highly jarring. It cheapens the emotional weight of the political commentary, and it honestly just makes the Century H2O ad feel artificially grafted onto the piece.
It's the equivalent of pouring your heart out to a friend about a deeply personal trauma, and the response is to ask if you want to buy some Tupperware. I mean, it just shatters the intimacy.
That's a hilarious analogy, but it's spot on. You've spent the last 15 minutes building this parasocial relationship of trust with your audience. You're discussing high-stakes issues of truth, deception, and, systemic manipulation.
Yeah, heavy stuff.
Really heavy. So when you violently shift into a late-night infomercial cadence, you retroactively signal to the listener that the heavy topic you were just discussing wasn't actually that serious to begin with.
Wow. Yeah, it undermines the whole show.
It really does. You demand the listener's emotional vulnerability, and then you immediately betray it for a transaction.
But again, let's play devil's advocate here. Many listeners actually prefer a clear, hard break so they know an ad has started, right? It allows them to just hit the 30-second skip button on their app if they want. So by blending the ad into the content, aren't you risking annoying the audience who feels like tricked into listening to a commercial?
Well, if you execute it poorly, yes, it totally feels like a trick. But an organic integration, when done right, actually serves both the listener and the sponsor much better.
How so?
Because advertisers pay a premium for host-read ads specifically because of the parasocial trust the host has built. If you do a hard pivot, you turn a premium host-read endorsement into a cheap, skippable radio spot.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. You're basically downgrading your own ad.
You actively devalue your own ad inventory by keeping the audience in an engaged, trusting mindset. They are far more likely to continue listening through the copy because it feels like an extension of the host's worldview.
Right, and they actually have the raw materials to do this properly right in the script. I mean, in the source material, they touch on the government slightly in the ad read, saying, just because it meets government standards doesn't mean that it's free of contaminants. They just didn't connect it to the political commentary they had literally finished delivering 2 seconds prior.
Exactly. The pieces are all there on the table. They just need to leverage the existing themes of the political commentary, specifically that distrust of official government narratives and uncovering hidden truths, to create a smooth, organic segue right into the ad read.
It elevates it from a pitch to a philosophy.
Yeah. You elevate the product from a mere transaction to a lifestyle choice that aligns with the audience's core values.
So instead of a hard cut to the tap water pitch, they bridge the gap by weaving the concepts together. Something along the lines of, just as we need to be vigilant about the misinformation polluting our social media feeds, and remember that official government narratives don't always protect us, we also need to look out for what the public utility companies leave in our physical environments. That includes the PFAS, chlorine, and heavy metals in our tap water. Which brings us to our sponsor, Century H2O.
Yes, exactly. That preserves the emotional integrity of the preceding discussion.
Because the theme is the same.
Right, you are still talking about vigilance. You are still talking about protecting yourself from systemic oversight. You give the heavy topics room to breathe, and then you naturally apply that same philosophy to a tangible product.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel gross or jarring.
Not at all. It makes the sponsor look better, it makes the host look more consistent, and frankly, it keeps the listener engaged rather than reaching for the skip button.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a fantastic exploration of how tone, structure, and pacing all work together to either elevate or, completely undermine the core arguments of a piece of audio. To recap our 3 actionable takeaways for you today.
Yep, let's hear them.
First, elevate your substantive, data-driven arguments, like the Qatar and China funding comparisons, over abrasive internet insults. This protects your credibility and ensures your actual points aren't lost in a state of emotional arousal.
Crucial.
Second, build explicit thematic bridges between disparate topics. Don't assume your audience can make the leap from international foreign policy to domestic niche trials without a guidepost. Take on that cognitive load for them.
Yeah, show them the filing cabinet.
Right. And third, use narrative continuity to weave your sponsor reads smoothly into the overarching themes of the content. Treat your ad reads as an extension of your show's worldview to avoid that tonal whiplash and preserve your audience's trust.
The raw energy, the passion, and the very clear perspective in this material are incredible assets. I mean, when you are willing to get on the mic and be unapologetic, you're already halfway there.
Oh, totally.
By implementing these structural and tonal refinements, that passion will hit its target with just so much greater force.
We absolutely love seeing this kind of bold material. We warmly invite you to apply these actionable suggestions and submit your next draft back for another critique. Remember, you have a high-performance engine in your commentary. Keep it on the paved road where that horsepower can actually drive you forward, rather than shaking the chassis apart in the dirt. Keep writing, keep refining, and we look forward to seeing where you take it next.